Good morning and happy Thanksgiving. I'm coming to you live again. I doubt anybody's going to join me here, but I figure I'll come in and make this video and then I'll just post it afterwards. I'm going to talk today about the birth of my firstborn child. Uh, it's kind of an interesting story. I was in the Army for my second time, and I was actually married for my second time, and I actually went to Germany for the second time. It's kind of an interesting thing. I did this all by the age of 20, so 2.0. um, and I'm stationed in Germany, and basically I had come home and divorced my first wife and married my second wife 3 days later. I don't know if that was such a great idea, but it is what it is. And I took her to Germany with me, and we were stationed in, I was stationed in Binlach, Germany, and we basically live in Bayreuth, Germany, which is the home of Franz Liszt, if you're a classical music fan. And we were on the top floor of an apartment building. I think it was fourth floor. And it was kind of neat. We went there in, I believe it was January of 1975. We went to Germany, and during our time there, my wife was having some medical issues, so I basically took her to the hospital. The actual major hospital for our area was in Nuremberg, which was like 50 miles north, or 80 kilometers if you want to go by Germany's measurements. I always loved it on my speedometer. It said 50 miles per hour, and 80 was right above it, kilometers per hour. So, somebody said, "Oh, it's 5/8," and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's rather interesting." So here we are in lovely Germany, and I take her up to, I don't know, I think I took her up to Nuremberg for a doctor's appointment. They took blood tests and let us know that she was actually hyperthyroid or hypothyroid. She needed thyroid medicine and they said, well, she can't get pregnant because of the thyroid problem. Well, it's kind of neat that when the doctors say you can't and God says you can, because she got pregnant probably around May of 1975, and we were quite amazed, and so were they. So they decided, well, since she's got the medical problem, we got to see her like all the time. I think every month they wanted us to run up there and for a doctor's appointment. Of course, I'm in the Army, and they're like, well, if we wanted you to have a wife and kid, we would have issued you one. And they said, basically, you can't drive her up. She's going to have to there's a bus. They've got a bus that goes up there. So most of the time I brought her up in the morning when I came up to go to work, and I dropped her off at the bus stop. And during the summer and fall, it wasn't too bad. The bus was there every time she had to go up. And, unfortunately, they made them stand outside for the bus. There was no indoor waiting area. So, of course, once winter comes in Germany, it's cold. I compared it to New York winters, but it's actually in Germany, it's actually a little bit worse. It's kind of much colder. It's sort of living over by Buffalo with the lake effect snow and, all the other lovely weather. So once winter came, all of a sudden the bus decided it wasn't going to work. And she called me up a couple of times at work and said she was still standing out there and the bus never came to take her to Nuremberg. And I talked to my CO and I kind of explained to him that, she needed to get up for her doctor's appointments and, because she was pregnant, she had medical problems. And they're like, if we wanted you to have a wife and kid, we would have issued you one. And basically, I think after a few times hearing that, I kind of told them where to stuff it. And they said, well, if you take her up, you're going to be AWOL and we'll give you, punishment for it. And I was like, whatever, do what you got to do. I'm going to do what I got to do. So basically, it was a fight. I basically took her up and it was like November, December, and January. Finally, we were getting close to the time of my daughter's birth. And by that time, the military was like, well, we're going to give you discharge because we feel you're not uh, good military material, with your attitude. And I was like, that's fine. I said, they were like, wanting to send me home. And I said, well, I'm not going home till my wife and daughter do. Well, my wife and child, we didn't know what the baby was. It's not like today where they can just zonk you and say, oh, you're having a boy or a girl. We were waiting for the surprise package type thing. So here we are. I'm taking him up there. I'm getting Article 15s. They're taking my money and my rank. I was a PFC, and I almost made it to Specialist 4, but never quite did. And after they started hitting me with little punishments, I went down rank quite rapidly. So finally, they were going to give me a dishonorable discharge. And I'm like, well, I won't take that either because, I'm like, it's not my fault you guys are being a pain in my butt. So they said, well, how about a general honorable? I'm like, well, I'll accept. But I'm like, I'm not going to go home until my child is born. And the doctors, of course, well, she can't travel until after the baby's born because, the medical issues. So here we are. I'm fighting with the Army, and the Army's fighting with me, and I'm trying to get my child born. And, the doctors, of course, are trying to see how everything's going. And the due date comes, and the baby's not coming out. The baby is nice and comfortable where she was, and she was just deciding that she wanted to stay there. So the doctors were like, well, we'd like you to come up and we're going to do an oxytocin test, and we're like, okay, that sounds like fun. So February 8th rolls around, 1976, bicentennial year, by the way. And, we get up in the morning and getting ready to go to Nuremberg and for some reason I decided I was going to be sick. And I took my temperature and I'm running 102 temperature. I'm like, lovely, So I'm like, well, let's just go, I'll get us there. So we got there and walked in, and the doctors took one look at both of us and like, which one is getting admitted? They looked at me and they were like, you're not doing too well, are you? And I'm like, no, not particularly. So here I am. They took my temperature and it had gone up like a half a degree. So I'm sitting there with 102.5 temperature now. And the first thing they did was they started putting pills in me and giving me shots. And they said, well, we're going to let you lay down while we do the oxytocin test with your wife here. So I don't know what they did. I was zonked out somewhere. They found a bunk for me, and I guess it was where they let people sleep when they weren't working or something. And they said, we'll wake you up when we're done. And so I don't know how long I was out, and I was like gone. Finally, they wake me up and they were like, well, we did the oxytocin test. Your wife's doing fine. She's in labor. And I was like, oh, that's nice. So I'm like, are we staying then? And they said, well, we don't, it's first kid, and usually that can take up to 24 to 48 hours. So we're not going to keep you here for that long. And I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that great. And they took my temperature, and it was like, oh, you're down to 100. I'm like, yeah, right. I'm really doing great here. So yeah, they basically kicked us out and sent us back to Bayreuth with another 50 miles. And, she's like talking to me all the way through. And I'm like, yeah, you better talk to me because if you don't, we're not going to make it. Got home and went upstairs and went to bed, and I don't know what time it was, but it was getting a little late, and I was like, poop. She's like, you want anything to eat? Oh, no, I don't want to eat. So we went to bed, and I don't know, I guess it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. She kicks me and is like, the baby's coming. And I'm like, no, you're fine. Just go back to sleep. And I think another hour went by, and she kicked me again. She's like, the baby's coming. And I'm like, all right, I'll get up. So I get up, I get dressed, and I wander downstairs. I had a nice little 65 VW bug while I was in Germany. That was basically my second. No, I forget. Was that my first bug or my second bug? I'll figure it out. Anyway, it was a 65 bug, and I went down, and over the evening, the temperature had dropped to sub-zero, which was, it's February in Germany. It's like New York in winter. And I turned the key, and it went, rrr, rrr, rrr. And I'm like, oh man, it's not going to start. Lovely. I go back upstairs, and I knock on my neighbor's door, my next door neighbor. And like I said, we're living in a German economy, but thankfully the Germans teach 4 different languages in school. So most of them speak English, which I'm kind of like, wow, they talk better English than I do. And I'm an American. I knock on his door, and he's like, he knows my wife is pregnant. And he's like, what's going on? I'm like, she's having the baby, and my car won't start. Can you call up the base and have them send down the ambulance? And he's all excited. Oh, you're having the baby. And I'm like, yeah, said we're going to have it right in our apartment if they don't get down here soon. So they called up the base, and I guess they were sending down the ambulance, and we're sitting around waiting, twiddling our thumbs and toes. And I think an hour went by or so. And I said, I don't know where they are, but they're taking their sweet time. So I said, well, let me go down and try to start the car again, because it started warming up outside finally. And I said, maybe the car will decide to start now. So I wander back down the stairs, and I get to the car, and sure enough, I'm standing there, and there goes the ambulance by. And they just passed our house, and I was like, I'm out there waving like an idiot. Fine, I guess they saw me, and they backed up, and they were like, is this where the baby's being born? And I'm like, yeah, you're at the right place. And they're like, okay. And they're like, well, we'll go up and get your wife. And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to get the car started. It won't start. And they're like, no problem. We'll get you there. So while they're up there getting the wife, I decided to try turn the key in the car, and it started. I was like, wow. So they came down, and they're like, well, you want to follow us up to the base? And I'm like, yeah, that'll be fine. So they took her in the ambulance, and I'm following them up there, and I guess they're checking her out to see where she is with the pregnancy. And they got her up to the base, and they actually had the helicopter out on the pad. They were going to actually airlift us up to Nuremberg. I was like, oh man, I almost got to fly in a helicopter. And they got her in there, and they said, nope, she's too far gone. We got to send her down to the civilian hospital, which was Kulmbach Krankenhaus. Now, if I said Krankenhaus wrong, you can correct me. However, so there we are. They loaded us both in the ambulance. I left my car up on base and trucked us down to Kulmbach Krankenhaus, where they were, of course, waiting for the pregnant lady who's just about having the baby in the ambulance. And they rushed her in, and I was thinking, no, I'd like to see my baby being born. And they said, no, you can't come in. And I'm like, why? Because I'm sick. And they said, no, we don't let husbands in the delivery room. I'm like, oh, man. So I'm sitting out in the waiting room, waiting patiently. And finally, they came out and said, oh, you have a baby girl. And I'm like, oh, goody. And they said, would you like to say hello to her? We're about to ship her up to Nuremberg with your wife. And I'm like, yeah, that would be nice. I would like to see my new daughter. So I went in and said hello, and basically got to meet her. And next thing I know, they're like, "Oh, we're going," and they took her up to Nuremberg, and I guess the army ambulance. I don't know if they took her up in the army ambulance or they took her up in just a regular ambulance, because I thought the army ambulance guys took me back up to pick up my car at the base, but it's possible I took a taxi. I can't remember now. Hey, you're talking 50 years ago. I'm lucky if I remember yesterday. So anyway, got back up to the base, got my car, and I said, well, I am sick, and I'm going home, and I'm going to take a hot bath, and then I'll drive up to Nuremberg. I figured, that'll give them time to get them set up and taken care of up in Nuremberg. And I managed to crawl my way up the stairs. My next door neighbor hears me coming in and says, "Oh, what, do you have the baby?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it was a girl." And they're like, "Congratulations," and everything. And I'm like, "Thank you." I said, "I'm going to take a shower and a bath, and then I'm going to go up there." I'm like, "I'm sick as a dog." So I get into the apartment and I close the door and I got into the bathroom and I threw all my clothes on the floor. I was like, I drew a bath. I think it was probably hotter than it should have been, because by the time I got in, I looked like a lobster. Let's put it this way. That got dropped in boiling water. I was bright red. And as I'm sitting in the bathtub trying to sweat out whatever sickness I had, my landlord's son comes up and he knocks on the door. And I'm like, I'm not getting out of the bathtub. So I'm like, "Come in." And the bathroom is right next to the entranceway. So he walks in and he's like, he sees all my clothes on the floor and he peeks into the bathroom. He's like, I heard your wife had the baby. And I'm like, "Yeah, I had a baby girl." And he said, "Congratulations." I said, "Yeah, I'm going up there. I just am sick and I needed and he's like, "Okay, I'll talk to you later." And he leaves. And finally, I'm like, beginning to feel somewhat better. And he said, "Okay, I'm going to head up to Nuremberg." I got out, got dressed, got in the car, started up. I was like, "Thank you, God." And I drove up to Nuremberg and I got to meet my brand new baby daughter. And, it was pretty cool. I was like, my daughter was cute from the day she was born. She didn't cry. All she did was Allah, Allah, Allah. And we were like waiting for her to cry or something. And my wife was saying, "No, she's been doing that ever since she came out." The doctors thought it was cute. Apparently, the doctors were dancing around the bed singing the Stars and Stripes or something when she was born. I was like, "Oh, lovely." I guess, they knew we were American, of course. The funny part was my wife took German in college, and she was like, she didn't remember too much of it, though, because this was the first time she really got to use it going to Germany. So I was like, yeah, it was pretty neat. The whole birth thing was kind of, I kind of would have liked to see her being born, but that wasn't in the cards. So there we go. That was the birth of my oldest daughter. There was more to the story, but I figure I won't put that all here. If you want to hear some more of the story, you can ask me, and I'll do a follow up on it. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story of strangeness. Thank you for watching. Make comments, whatever. Let me know if you like this or not, because, if you don't want to see this, I won't do it anymore.